The alarm screamed through the Zeltharian Deep Space Monitoring Station like a wounded animal. Senior Analyst Kexval dropped his morning nutrient pack and rushed to his console, his 6 eyes widening as the readings flooded his screen. For 20 years, he had watched the empty void between star systems, cataloging asteroids and space debris. Nothing had ever made his equipment scream like this. "What is that thing?" whispered his assistant, Morjean, leaning over Kexval's shoulder. The younger Zeltharian's tentacles quivered with nervous energy as he stared at the impossible data streaming across their monitors. Kexval's clawed fingers danced across the control panel, running the scan 3 more times. Each result came back identical. Something massive was moving through space at speeds that should have torn apart any known vessel. The energy readings were off the charts, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded him of a giant heartbeat. "Run a debris analysis," Kexval ordered, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "Maybe it's a broken asteroid cluster." The computer hummed for several minutes before displaying its conclusion. Morjean read the results aloud, his voice cracking. "Composition unknown. Structure appears artificial. No match found in galactic databases." Artificial. That single word hung in the air like poison gas. In 3 centuries of monitoring deep space, the Coalition had catalogued every known ship design, from the sleek Altarian cruisers to the bulky Centaurian cargo haulers. This thing matched nothing in their records. Kexval pulled up the trajectory map, and his blood turned to ice water. The object was heading straight for the Kepler system, one of the most populated regions in Coalition space. 3 billion souls lived on those worlds, including his own daughter who had just started university on Kepler Prime. "How long until it reaches Kepler?" he asked, though he already dreaded the answer. "At current speed, 72 hours and 14 minutes, Morjean replied, his tentacles now shaking visibly. The object's velocity defied physics. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast without breaking apart from the stress. Yet there it was, maintaining perfect course stability while generating enough energy to power a small moon. The heat signatures alone suggested whatever propulsion system it used was barely contained within its hull. Kexval opened a priority channel to Coalition High Command on Nexus Prime. Within minutes, Admiral Vortha's scarred face appeared on his screen. The old Altarian warrior had fought in dozens of conflicts, but his expression grew grave as he reviewed the data. "Are you certain of these readings?" Admiral Vorth asked, his mechanical voice betraying no emotion. A battle wound from the Rigel Wars had damaged his vocal cords, requiring a synthetic replacement. "Triple-checked, sir. Whatever this thing is, it's not in our databases. The energy output suggests weapons systems far beyond anything we've encountered." Admiral Vorth was quiet for a long moment, studying the scrolling data. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as it processed the information at superhuman speeds. Finally he spoke. "I'm scrambling the 5th Fleet to intercept. Continue monitoring and report any changes immediately." The channel closed, leaving Kexval alone with his mounting dread. He pulled up historical records, searching for anything that might explain this mysterious vessel. Most spacefaring species were well documented, their ship designs familiar to any analyst worth their credentials. Morjean gasped suddenly, pointing at his secondary monitor. "Sir, I'm picking up faint transmission attempts. The object is trying to communicate. Can you clean up the signal?" "Working on it." Morjean's tentacles flew across his console, adjusting frequencies and filtering out cosmic interference. After several tense minutes, fragmented words began to emerge from the static. "Surrender, war criminals. Proxima Station, 72 hours." The words sent chills through both analysts. Proxima Station was a name from ancient history, buried in classified files that most Coalition citizens had never heard of. Kexval's security clearance allowed him limited access to historical archives, and what he found made his stomach churn. 3 centuries ago, Coalition forces had discovered a small research outpost in the Proxima system. The inhabitants were listed as unregistered colonists of unknown species. The official report stated that the outpost was eliminated due to potential security threats, but the details were heavily redacted. Morjean searched the archives for any reference to the species that occupied Proxima Station. His assistant worked frantically, diving deep into classified databases. After an hour of searching, he found a single entry that made both of them freeze in terror. Species designation, human. Status, extinct. Last known location, Proxima System Research Facility. Elimination confirmed by Coalition security forces, stardate 2387.4. Humans. The name appeared in a handful of ancient records, always described as a primitive species that had somehow developed faster than light travel. The files suggested they were relatively new to space travel, with only a few small colonies scattered across the galactic rim. If humans are extinct, Morgine whispered, then what is that thing heading for Kepler? Kexval stared at his monitors, watching the massive object continue its relentless approach. The energy readings had increased by 12% in the last hour, suggesting the vessel was actually accelerating. Whatever was aboard that ship had waited 300 years to make its presence known. Send everything to Admiral Vorth, he ordered. Include the historical data about Proxima Station and the human elimination. He needs to know what his fleet might be facing. As the transmission uploaded to Coalition Command, Kexval couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing the return of something that should have stayed dead. The object on his screen pulsed with malevolent purpose, carrying with it the weight of 3 centuries and the promise of terrible reckoning. In 71 hours, they would discover just how wrong their ancestors had been about the extinction of humanity. Ambassador Relnatha's hands trembled as he adjusted the universal translator for the 15th time in an hour. The Coalition's most experienced diplomat had negotiated peace treaties with 17 different species, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Across from him in the communication chamber sat the Emergency Council, their faces pale with fear as they waited for contact with the mysterious vessel. Signal strength is increasing, reported Communications Officer Vextal, her voice barely above a whisper. The object is responding to our transmission attempts. The main screen flickered with static and interference. For 3 hours they had been sending standard first contact protocols in every known language. The responses had been nothing but electronic noise and fragments of unknown speech patterns. But now something was changing. I'm getting clearer audio, Vextal announced, her tentacles dancing across the control panel. The translator is starting to pick up linguistic patterns. A low hum filled the chamber as the universal translator worked to decode the alien speech. The Coalition had developed this technology over centuries of contact with dozens of species. It had never failed to establish basic communication within hours of first contact. Yet this signal carried something different, something that made the machine struggle. Suddenly the static cleared. A voice emerged from the speakers, speaking in perfectly clear Coalition standard. The accent was strange, the pronunciation slightly off, but every word was understandable. This is Captain James Mitchell of the UES Retribution. I know you can hear me. The council members looked at each other in shock. No unknown species had ever mastered their language so quickly. Ambassador Relnath leaned forward, his voice carefully controlled. Unknown vessel, this is Ambassador Relnath of the Galactic Coalition. We welcome peaceful contact with your people. Please state your intentions. A laugh came through the speakers, cold and bitter. Peaceful contact? After 300 years you want to talk about peace? I do not understand your reference to 300 years. Our records show no previous contact with your species. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Captain Mitchell spoke again. His voice had changed, becoming harder and more dangerous. Your records show no contact because you thought you killed us all. You murdered 10,000 of my people at Proxima Station and declared our species extinct. But some of us survived in the dark spaces between stars. We've been waiting, building, preparing for this day. Ambassador Relnath felt his blood turn cold. Proxima Station was a classified entry in the historical archives, a small incident from centuries past that most current officials knew nothing about. He had read the files after receiving the monitoring station's report, but the details had been heavily censored. Captain Mitchell, I assure you that current Coalition leadership had no involvement in historical conflicts. Perhaps we can arrange a meeting to discuss. Discuss. The human's voice cut through his words like a blade. You want to discuss the murder of children? You want to negotiate about the families burned alive in their sleep? The ambassador tried to maintain his diplomatic composure, but sweat was running down his face. Around the table, military advisors were frantically pulling up ancient battle records while intelligence officers searched for any information about human survivors. We understand your anger, but surely we can find a peaceful resolution. The individuals responsible for past actions are long dead. We cannot be held accountable for decisions made centuries ago. Another long silence. When Captain Mitchell spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 300 years of hatred. The debt remains unpaid, Ambassador. Your people took everything from us. Our homes, our families, our future. We've spent 30 decades in the void, building ships designed for one purpose. Today we collect what you owe. General Korth, the Coalition's highest-ranking military officer, activated his communication panel. His cybernetic implants glowed as he spoke with mechanical precision. "Captain Mitchell, this is General Korth of Coalition Defense Command. I have 47 warships moving to intercept your vessel. Stand down immediately or we will consider you hostile." The human's laughter returned, but this time it carried no humor at all. 47 ships? "General, 3 centuries ago your ancestors sent twice that number to destroy one research station. We learned from that mistake. We built better." On the tactical display, the readings from the approaching vessel continued to climb. The energy output had increased another 20%, and new signatures were appearing across its hull. Whatever weapons systems it carried were powering up. Intelligence Chief Morvac spoke up, her voice shaking. "Captain, we've located the Proxima Station files. The official report states that a small human colony was eliminated due to security concerns. But the details suggest it was a research facility studying faster-than-light communication methods." "Security concerns?" Captain Mitchell repeated, his voice dripping with disgust. "Is that what you called it when you turned our scientists into ash? When you murdered our children because we learned to travel between stars too quickly for your comfort?" Ambassador Relnoth made one final attempt at negotiation. "Captain, I propose a formal meeting between our governments. We can discuss reparations, establish new treaties, find a way forward that honors your losses without further bloodshed." The response came immediately, final and absolute. "You have 71 hours and 37 minutes to evacuate all coalition military forces from the Kepler system. Surrender the war criminals responsible for Proxima Station. Any civilian populations may remain unharmed, but your soldiers and officials will face human justice. The individuals responsible are dead, Captain. It's been 300 years. Then their successors will answer for their crimes. The debt passes to those who inherited their power." The communication channel closed with a sharp click, leaving the council chamber in deadly silence. On the tactical display, the human vessel continued its approach toward Kepler system, now less than 60 hours away. General Korth was the first to speak, his mechanical voice cutting through the stillness. "Recall all diplomatic vessels from the intercept zone. Order the Fifth Fleet to full battle readiness. Whatever that thing is, we're going to have to destroy it." Ambassador Relnoth stared at the blank screen, knowing that diplomacy had failed before it truly began. The humans weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to collect a debt 3 centuries overdue, and they had no intention of accepting anything less than full payment. Admiral Vorth stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Nexus Guardian, watching his tactical display with growing unease. 47 warships spread out in perfect formation around him, representing the finest vessels in the Coalition fleet. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a small moon, their crews trained for decades in deep space combat. Yet something about this engagement felt wrong. "Distance to target, 2 million kilometers and closing," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Bexvar. The young Altarian's voice carried the confidence of a crew that had never lost a battle. "All ships report ready for combat." The enemy vessel appeared on their main screen as a dark silhouette against the stars. The UES Retribution looked nothing like any warship in Coalition databases. Its hull was scarred and blackened, covered in strange protrusions that pulsed with internal light. Energy readings showed power levels that should have melted the ship's structure, yet it maintained perfect course stability. "Size estimate?" Admiral Vorth asked, his cybernetic eye whirring as it analyzed the approaching vessel. 1.2 kilometers in length, sir. Mass readings are impossible. The density suggests armor plating 3 times thicker than our heaviest battleships. Admiral Vorth had commanded fleets for 30 years. He had fought pirates, rebels, and rogue AI networks. Experience taught him to respect any enemy that could build something like the vessel approaching his formation. But orders were orders, and Coalition command had been clear: stop the human ship at all costs. "Open a channel to the enemy vessel," he commanded. Perhaps there was still time for a final negotiation. The screen flickered, revealing a human face that shocked everyone on the bridge. Captain James Mitchell looked more machine than man. Scars covered half his face, while cybernetic implants glowed beneath his skin. One eye had been replaced with a red optical sensor that tracked movements with inhuman precision. His age was impossible to determine, as if time itself had damaged him. "Admiral Vorth," Captain Mitchell said, his voice carrying no emotion. "I know your reputation. You're considered an honorable soldier by Coalition standards. Captain Mitchell, I'm ordering you to stand down. Turn your vessel around and we can discuss terms with Coalition command." The human scarred face showed something that might have been a smile. You have impressive ships, Admiral. 47 vessels, all equipped with quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons. Your crews are well-trained and experienced. Such a waste. Captain, this is your final warning. Surrender now or we will open fire. Fire when ready, Admiral. Let's see what 3 centuries of anger can accomplish. The channel closed. Admiral Vorth stared at the screen for a moment, then turned to his weapons officer. All ships, open fire. Target their engines and weapon systems. Try to disable, not destroy. The Coalition fleet unleashed hell. 47 ships fired simultaneously, sending hundreds of energy beams and missiles racing toward the human vessel. The space between the fleets lit up like a small star as enough firepower to destroy a planet focused on one target. The weapons struck the Retribution's hull and simply disappeared. The energy beams vanished into the ship's armor like water soaking into sand. The missiles exploded harmlessly against barriers that seemed to bend space itself around the vessel. Not a single shot penetrated the human ship's defenses. Impossible, whispered Lieutenant Bexvar. Nothing can absorb that much firepower. Captain Mitchell's voice came over the communication system, calm and unmoved. Our turn. The human ship opened fire. What emerged from its weapon ports looked like controlled lightning, beams of energy that twisted space as they traveled. The first beam struck the Coalition cruiser Stellar Wind. The ship simply ceased to exist, not exploded or destroyed, but erased as if it had never been built. Evasive maneuvers. Admiral Vorth shouted, but the human weapons moved faster than thought. Another beam reached out and touched the destroyer Quick Strike. The ship folded in on itself like paper, its hull crumpling into a ball of twisted metal before disappearing into a tiny point of light. The Coalition ships scattered, trying to use their speed advantage, but the Retribution's weapons tracked them effortlessly. Each beam that fired removed another vessel from existence. The humans weren't just destroying ships, they were deleting them from reality. Sir, we're losing ships faster than I can count, Lieutenant Bexvar reported, his voice cracking with fear. The enemy weapons are using some kind of space-folding technology. Our shields and armor are completely useless. Admiral Vorth watched his fleet die around him. Ships that had served with honor for decades vanished in flashes of impossible light. Crews he had trained personally became nothing more than fading energy signatures on his tactical display. Full retreat, he ordered. All remaining ships fall back to the outer system. Negative, Admiral, came Captain Mitchell's voice over the communications. This ends here. The Retribution moved with sudden speed, accelerating impossibly fast for something so massive. It positioned itself in the center of the retreating Coalition formation and began firing in all directions. The human ships spun like a deadly flower, each rotation sending out beams that erased everything they touched. In 14 minutes it was over. 39 Coalition warships had been completely destroyed. 8 others, including Admiral Vorth's flagship, drifted powerless with their engines dead and weapon systems offline. The Retribution hung motionless among the debris, its hull glowing with heat but otherwise undamaged. Admiral Vorth's bridge was dark except for emergency lighting. Half his crew was dead, killed when the human weapons overloaded their control systems. His tactical officer lay unconscious at her station, blood running from her ears where the ship's computers had screamed their death songs. Captain Mitchell's face appeared on the emergency screen, his red eye glowing in the darkness. Admiral, your flagship's life support will last 6 hours. I suggest you contact Coalition Command and inform them that negotiations are no longer possible. What are you? Admiral Vorth whispered, his voice broken. We're what you made us, Admiral. 300 years ago you tried to kill gods. Today you discovered that some gods are very hard to kill. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vorth alone with the wreckage of his fleet and the terrible knowledge of what humanity had become. The emergency alert screamed through every Coalition facility across the galaxy. President Morvell sat in his command bunker deep beneath Nexus Prime, staring at the tactical displays that showed the complete destruction of the Fifth Fleet. 14 minutes. 47 warships reduced to space dust in less time than it took to drink a cup of tea. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel, reported Communications Chief Yeltarn, her voice shaking. It's broadcasting on all frequencies across the Kepler system. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain James Mitchell standing on what appeared to be the bridge of his ship. Behind him, the walls were covered with names etched into the metal, thousands upon thousands of them stretching into the darkness. The human's scarred face looked directly into the camera as if he could see every person watching. People of the Coalition, he began, his voice carrying across 3 billion souls on dozens of worlds. 300 years ago, your government sent warships to Proxima Station. They found 10,000 humans living peacefully on a research facility. Men, women, children, scientists studying the stars and dreaming of a better future. President Morvell felt his heart sinking as Mitchell continued. The human's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it that promised terrible things. Your ancestors decided we were a threat. Not because we attacked anyone, not because we took anything that belonged to you, but because we learned to travel between stars too quickly for your comfort. So they burned our station. They murdered our families. They killed our children while they slept in their beds. On Kepler Prime, 3 billion people watched their screens in horrified silence. In the capital city alone, transportation systems shut down as everyone stopped to listen. The humans' words carried weight that penetrated deep into their souls. Your leaders told you we were extinct. They celebrated the elimination of what they called a primitive species. But some of us escaped into the dark spaces between galaxies. We spent 3 centuries building ships like this one. We spent 30 decades preparing for this moment. The view shifted to show the interior of the Retribution. Massive corridors stretched in all directions, their walls covered with more names than anyone could count. Children's voices echoed through the ship, recordings of the dead speaking their last words as coalition forces burned their homes. This is not conquest, Mitchell continued. This is justice. We did not return to rule you. We came back to collect a debt that your people owe to ours. President Morvell activated his emergency council communication system. Around him, holographic displays showed coalition leaders from across the galaxy, all watching the human broadcast with growing terror. What are our military options? He asked General Korth, though he already suspected the answer. None, sir, the general replied, his mechanical voice flatter than usual. Intelligence reports indicate at least 40 more ships like the Retribution are approaching coalition space from different vectors. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. On the screen, Captain Mitchell walked through his ship, passing rooms filled with advanced technology that defied understanding. Weapons that could fold space, engines that bent the laws of physics, shields that made matter simply cease to exist. We learned from your attack on Proxima Station, Mitchell explained as he moved through the corridors. Your people taught us that mercy is weakness, that peace is just preparation for war. We spent 300 years becoming what you forced us to become. The view returned to the bridge where other humans worked at control stations. Like their captain, they all bore the scars of centuries in deep space. Cybernetic implants glowed beneath their skin, and their eyes held the cold light of people who had given up everything human except their need for justice. The terms are simple, Mitchell announced. All coalition military forces will withdraw from the Kepler system immediately. Government officials directly responsible for maintaining the policies that led to Proxima Station will surrender themselves for trial under human law. President Morvell tried to speak, but found his voice had abandoned him. Around the table, his advisors stared at their screens with the look of people watching their civilization die. We know that those who gave the orders are long dead, Mitchell continued. But their authority passed to you. Their decisions became your inheritance. The debt they created is now yours to pay. Intelligence Chief Ralmon accessed the classified archives, searching desperately for any information that might help them negotiate. What he found made his blood freeze. The Proxima Station incident wasn't isolated. Over 3 centuries, coalition forces had eliminated 17 primitive species that developed faster than light travel too quickly. Sir, Ralmon whispered, the humans aren't the only ones. We've been destroying developing species for centuries. If word of this gets out, the implication hung in the air like poison. Across coalition space, dozens of species might start questioning their own histories, wondering if their peoples had also been victims of police actions and security operations. On the screen, Captain Mitchell made his final announcement. You have 48 hours to begin evacuations. Any military vessel that remains in Kepler system after that time will be destroyed. Any government official who refuses to surrender will be hunted across the galaxy until justice is served. The transmission ended, leaving the coalition leadership in deadly silence. Outside their bunker, panic was spreading across Nexus Prime as the reality of the situation sank in. The most powerful military alliance in the galaxy had been reduced to begging for mercy from a species they thought they had exterminated. President Morvell finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Contact all coalition worlds. Begin immediate evacuation of Kepler system. And someone get me the complete files on every species elimination in our history. The reckoning had begun, and 300 years of buried guilt was about to be paid in full. President Morvell's shuttle approached the human warship with trembling hands gripping the controls. The retribution filled his viewport like a metal mountain, its scarred hull pulsing with energy that made his ship's instruments scream warnings. Never in his 60 years of political service had he felt so small, so helpless. "Docking bay is opening," reported his pilot, a young Centaurian whose voice cracked with fear. "They're guiding us in with tractor beams." The shuttle settled into a vast hangar filled with smaller human vessels. Each ship bore the same dark metal construction and weapon systems that defied Coalition understanding. As the hangar doors sealed behind them, Morvell noticed something that made his stomach turn. The walls were covered with pictures. Thousands of them. Human faces smiling at the camera, families posing together, children playing in gardens under alien suns. Captain James Mitchell waited for them at the airlock, flanked by 2 other humans. The woman beside him wore the uniform of a military officer, her face bearing similar scars and cybernetic enhancements. The man on his left appeared to be a civilian, but his eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who had spent centuries planning this moment. "President Morvell," Captain Mitchell said, his voice echoing in the metal chamber. "Welcome aboard the Retribution. I am Captain Mitchell. This is Lieutenant Commander Emma Blake, my second in command. And Dr. Robert Hayes, our historical records keeper." The Coalition delegation followed their escorts through corridors that served as monuments to the dead. Every surface carried names, dates, and personal messages from the victims of Proxima Station. Children's drawings were preserved behind protective glass, showing stick figures of families that would never grow old. "These are the people your ancestors murdered," Dr. Hayes explained as they walked. "We saved everything we could from the station's data banks. Every name, every face, every dream that was destroyed." President Morvell tried to maintain his diplomatic composure, but the weight of history pressed down on him with each step. His advisor, Trade Minister Kexanael, whispered urgent questions about negotiation possibilities, but the human delegation ignored them completely. They entered a vast chamber that took Morvell's breath away. The room stretched upward for hundreds of meters, its walls covered with holographic displays showing star maps, technical specifications, and battle plans. At the center stood a massive table made from what appeared to be salvaged metal from Proxima Station. "This is where we planned your civilization's restructuring," Lieutenant Commander Blake announced, activating the displays around them. 300 years of preparation have led to this moment. The star maps showed human fleets positioned throughout Coalition space. Dozens of ships like the Retribution had emerged from deep space, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. But the technical displays revealed something even more terrifying. The humans had been watching Coalition space for centuries, learning their weaknesses, preparing for every possible response. "Your terms?" President Morvell said finally, his voice barely steady. "What do you want from us?" Captain Mitchell walked to the table and placed his scarred hands on its surface. "Immediate dissolution of the Coalition government. Complete disbandment of all military forces. Reparations paid to the surviving human colonies scattered across the galaxy." "Surviving colonies?" Trade Minister Kexanael asked. "We thought that you killed us all?" Dr. Hayes laughed bitterly. 17 settlements survived your genocide, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. We've spent 3 centuries growing, building, preparing for this day." Lieutenant Commander Blake activated another display, showing the proposed governmental structure. "The galaxy will be reorganized under human oversight. Each species will maintain local autonomy, but major decisions affecting interstellar relations will require human approval." President Morvell studied the plans with growing horror. The humans weren't just demanding surrender, they were completely redesigning galactic civilization. "And if we refuse?" Captain Mitchell's scarred face showed no emotion. "Then we activate the Omega protocols. Every Coalition world will be sterilized, and we'll rebuild from the ashes with species that understand the value of peace." The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Around the table, Coalition representatives realized they were witnessing the end of everything they had known. The balance of power that had existed for centuries was being swept away by the ghosts of a supposedly extinct species. "The trials," Dr. Hayes continued, "will begin immediately. Every government official who maintained policies derived from the Proxima Station decision will face human justice. We have detailed records of your political lineages." Trade Minister Kexanael stepped forward desperately. "But the people responsible are dead. You can't hold us accountable for decisions made centuries ago." "Can't we?" Lieutenant Commander Blake's voice carried the weight of 300 years of anger. You inherited their power, their authority, their responsibility. The debt passes through the generations until it's paid. President Morvell looked around the chamber, seeing his civilization's death warrant written in human technology and determination. How long do we have to comply? 24 hours for governmental dissolution, Captain Mitchell replied. 72 hours for military disbandment. 1 year for complete reparations. The signing took place in silence. Each coalition representative added their name to documents that ended their species' independence. As President Morvell signed the final page, he noticed Captain Mitchell watching him with something that might have been satisfaction. This doesn't feel like justice, Morvell whispered. It feels like revenge. Captain Mitchell leaned forward, his red cybernetic eye glowing in the chamber's dim light. Justice would have been leaving us alone at Proxima Station. What you're receiving is mercy. We could have simply eliminated your species as you did to 17 others. Instead, we're giving you a chance to learn from your mistakes. As the coalition delegation was escorted back to their shuttle, Dr. Hayes made one final statement. Remember this day when you encounter other developing species. Remember that somewhere in the dark they might be building ships like ours. The shuttle departed the Retribution carrying the documents that would reshape galactic civilization. Behind them, the human fleet spread across coalition space, beginning the long process of collecting a debt 3 centuries overdue.